And so I wanted those states to accompany me into the interview. And so what I did was I set it up in my mind, in my imagination, just like an athlete does when they use mental rehearsal. Who's heard of athletes doing mental rehearsal? So an athlete will see themselves doing a move, let's say a Tiger Woods or a Greg Norman, depending how old you are, would see themselves hitting the ideal shot. You might get a Chuck Norris who's visualizing himself throwing the perfect blow or the perfect kick or blocking and then counter-attacking. And he might see that all play out in his mind, in his imagination. Now, the interesting thing about your unconscious mind is it doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. It's the same thing. So you can get just as much power from doing a repetition of something in your mind than you can by actually doing it. It's just as much power, if not more. In fact, there was a test group of 3 basketball teams. They were all evenly matched. The 3 basketball teams went and played basketball. And the first team, what they did was play basketball. So for 2 hours a week, they just practiced the drills, practiced the skills. Drills and skills. The second group was half meditation and half training. And the half meditation, half training, they did the drills and skills, but they also did the mental work. They saw themselves standing up there and shooting the perfect shot. And they practiced over and over again in your mind. Now here's the beautiful thing about meditation, is that when you meditate, you can do things faster than in reality. See, when you're playing basketball and you throw a shot, either it goes in or it misses, now it bounces over there. You've got to go run, collect the ball, bring it back, then take another shot. If you do it in your mind, you can get it in and get it in and get it in. You can take 3 or 4 shots in your imagination in the same amount of time that you could take 1 shot in reality. Okay, maybe, unless it hits the front of the ring, comes straight back to you, then you go again straight away. But what I'm saying is your imagination, you can speed it up. You can do things faster in your mind. And so you can do what I call mental rehearsals or repetition of behaviour faster in your mind than you can in reality. So the third group did just 2 hours of meditation a week, didn't play basketball at all. Now who won? Who came first? Well, what was interesting was the one that came first was the one that did the half-half. They did the half practical and the half meditation. They actually came first. It was a good balance between the two. But that wasn't the most interesting thing. The interesting thing was the one that came second. It was the ones that did the meditation. They came second. They beat the ones that did nothing but training, the drills and the skills. So we've learned from that how powerful the mind is. It's very powerful. If you're doing meditation, doing it well, it can be a powerful, important thing for your life. What you're talking about with rapport is a state of trust and responsiveness. And the way we get rapport is through a thing called matching and mirroring. But I'll talk about that another time. Okay, so matching and mirroring, I built rapport, and I've been using all these skills for many years now, but I've just refined them. And the more we become aware of something, the better we can get at it. And the more we practice it, obviously, the better we get. Until this becomes a way of life. And so we take anything and we say, well, is it possible? And we move it to this side of the spectrum. And that's where NLP gets its power from. And also from modelling, by finding someone else who's here and saying, what are they doing? You know, they're wealthy, they're healthy, they're happy, they've got a great relationship, they've got a really deep connection to God or spirituality or the universe or their higher self. They seem really switched on. How are they doing it? And then we look at what they're doing and then model the behaviour. And we can ask questions to find out how they see the world, how they make the world make sense, how they've got the success they've got. And if you take the same, it's like with a child and a father. Let's say the child's learning how to walk. The father would place 1 foot on one shoe and 1 foot on the other shoe, and he would grab his little child's hands and begin walking backwards, signalling the motion of walking. And what you're doing there is modelling walking for that child. And it's the same way. And we can make that change or transition at any age. And we can learn to model somebody else who's got the success that we want. So if somebody succeeded where you want to succeed, what we do is we go find out what their model of the world is, how they perceive this world, what they look for, what they're punching into the search engine of their brain. It's like having a computer in front of us. We punch in poverty. What's going to show up? Well, everything to do with poverty. But if you type in success or wealth, everything to do with wealth comes up on the screen. And so it's not that your brain and their brain is different, it's that you're being programmed, whether consciously or unconsciously, to focus on certain things. Whereas other people have been programmed to focus on other things. And so if we want to get more results in life, change the programming. And the truth is you can change anything about your mind. It's your mind. You're born with 12 to 14 billion brain cells. And there's also a lot to be said for the power of habits. And once we develop a new habit, there's... Oh, loving this. This is fun. Okay, so in your brain, there's parts of the brain called an axon. There's also neurons. And there's neurological pathways set up in your brain. There's a substance created by the glial cells, which is called myelin. And what myelin does is creates a sheath or a coating around the neurological pathways, around the axons that are connected to neurons. And so what happens is when you create a habit and you start running that habit over and over again, what happens is myelin begins to coat around these axons. And the power of myelin is this, is that myelin can actually increase the speed of the electrical signal that pulsates through your mind. So when myelin coating gets thick enough, and when it's completely saturated in myelin, the signal's sped up to 100 times. And that's the power of habits, is that when you run a habit over and over and over and over again until it becomes like walking or breathing. My karate instructor used to talk about karate. He said you should eat karate, sleep karate, breathe karate, everything karate. And that's the way he lived his life. Everything was karate. It was all he thought about. And he was a bouncer, is his day job, or sometimes night job, and he was also a karate instructor. And that was his world. He loved it. Everything to him was training. He'd train in the morning, he'd train in the night, in the evening. He'd train any time that he could. He just loved it. And he had different groups, sometimes women's groups, sometimes children's groups, other adult groups. He just loved training. Training was everything to him. And so what happened was, when it came to exercise and training, it was just a habit that he'd formed so much in his life that he couldn't think of a time when he didn't want to train. In fact, he hated being sick. I remember one time he was sick for 2 weeks. A big flu came and knocked him out. He was miserable because he wasn't able to do his training. And he lived for it. Even he pushed himself a few times to get out and train, even though he was sick. He rugged up and he still came along and trained just because he loved it so much. So what happens is, if you go over and over a habit in your mind, and this is also true for addictions. And the reason why people have such trouble getting off addiction is because of the myelin coating. It's because the signal, the electrical pulse is moving so fast through that part of the brain that it's the easiest option to take. Going back to the addiction is so simple, it's so easy. And changing that addiction is so difficult.